So another part of the study we're calling the age of digital obesity. What do we mean by that?
The thing we were looking at here in the earlier data, we saw these large challenges emerging for younger Americans, these 16 to 29-year-olds, and to some degree too, the 30 to 44-year-olds, looking at the sense of disconnection, loneliness. So what we wanted to try and do was find, could we somewhere within their behaviour, in particular their digital behaviour, find a little bit of an association here about what might be going on for them and why this might be the case.
When we actually look at the digital platform usage and we look across platforms like Facebook and YouTube, Amazon and Messenger, Instagram, Snapchat, whatever, we're actually finding there's a huge amount of time invested in these apps. If you just look at the Facebook apps alone, that family, it's 127.6 minutes per day spent on those apps.
So we were asking the average American, where were they going on a typical day in terms of social media platforms, apps, and then how much time they were spending in them. And what we found, straight off the bat is that on average, the Americans were spending 301 minutes a day in these apps and platforms and digital properties. Just a huge amount of digital consumption going on. And yeah, if you're looking at where that time is going, some of the largest amount of those time was going into the Facebook properties, but then also YouTube. They were both very, very large areas of consumption.
What's really interesting to me as well is the third most consumed property, if you look at it, is Amazon, which isn't social media.
No. The idea that people could be spending time there in terms of Prime, in terms of content watching, but it could also very likely be to do with shopping. Just having that, that browser always open there or that app always open, just kind of popping back into it throughout the day to purchase and things throughout the day.
It's that social e-commerce ecosystem. I think we've seen that accelerating. I think it's going to continue to accelerate and really that going back to thinking about isolation and loneliness and depression and whatever. How do we make ourselves feel better? Well, we go online and we look at the perfect lives and then maybe we buy what they buy so we can try and have some of that magic that they have, right?
And within this consumption too, we're seeing double screening, potentially triple screening. So it's not necessarily that these are being done individually and separately. You could be, again, very easily streaming YouTube on your Apple TV, as well as having Facebook open, as well as possibly having a shopping app like Amazon open as well.
Just a constant barrage. And when we actually look at those daily digital minutes as well, we break it out because we've just been talking about usage.
Yes.
On average, across all ages.
Yeah, so it's 301 minutes on average for all Americans. But then we can go into exactly which groups of Americans are consuming more or less than that average.
What are we seeing, Nick?
The amount of time that youth are spending in digital minutes, 16 to 29-year-olds, over 500 minutes a day, which is almost 8.5 hours a day being spent on these digital properties. And then even the next age band up, the 30 to 44s, were still spending 431 minutes a day.
And that's harmful to society, right?
It's possibly harmful to society, absolutely. The amount of time, you think about 8.5 hours a day. Where could you possibly be finding that amount of time in your day? If you're talking about you're getting up in the morning, it's the first thing you're doing when you're waking up. It's likely something that you're doing intermittently throughout the day as well. Yeah. And then there's a large, probably chunk of time being spent at the end of the day as well with this stuff.
And you're not paying attention to school fully, and you're not paying attention to your family fully, potentially. You're not paying attention to work fully. So the impact of this behavior is bigger than just, say, the mental health of the people that are on social media, right?
Absolutely. And I think the interesting thing too is if you look at that sort of progression as you move up into the age bands, at the 60 plus level, they're only on average spending 96 minutes a day on these digital properties, which is just way lower, significantly lower than what you're looking at that 16 to 39.
And this is the new opportunity for the platforms and the apps. They're going after the older generation. Right, so potentially in the next few years we could actually see those numbers going up for the people that are 60 plus even. So over and above that platform usage, we need to look at the daily digital minutes versus mental health. We saw a correlation there, right?
Yes, we saw an association between the amount of time that people were spending in daily digital minutes with both their depression, their self-reported depression, their anxiety, so treatment with depression and anxiety, and then the self-reported narcissism as well.
So what are we seeing here?
Basically, if you look at the time chunks, Anytime you're spending more than 240 minutes a day, which is 4 hours or more, in social media or online platforms, there's a significant increase in your rates of depression, anxiety, and self-identified narcissism.
And this is across all ages as well, right?
It is, yeah. You're looking at the entire population here. So a third of people who are spending more than 4 hours online will be depressed, will be reporting having been treated for depression. 33% as well, so a third with anxiety, and almost 31% there with self-identified narcissism. And you compare that to spending less than 1 hour. So if you're an hour or less in social media and online apps, then it's below 10% for all three of those things.
So people that just use it less are fundamentally more solid in terms of like how their mental health is.
Yeah, and you know, this relationship, it could be one of two things. It
Right.
could be that people who are anxious and depressed and self-identify as narcissists are going to social media more often. That's possible. But it could also be that as you spend more time on social media, it's causing depression, anxiety, and self-identified narcissism. We can't say for sure which one that is.
Yeah.
It's possibly both.
And for some of these that want to be influencers, that have that aspiration, it might even be part of their brand as well.
It's possible.
Yeah. So going beyond the daily digital minutes that we spend online on these platforms and apps and our mental health, what about digital restriction? Can we stop?
This is a really important point. The amount of time that people need to restrict is quite important. You know, I think for the average American at 300 minutes, maybe an hour a day less could move them into the kind of healthier band of 4 hours or less. But for youth in particular, who are up at almost 8.5 hours, you know, they're possibly having to restrict 4.5 hours of time to get back into this sort of a healthier band in terms of their usage. And not only that, then we ask them, you know, how hard would it be, how difficult would it be for you to be deviceless without a cell phone or tablet for 24 hours, or to not use social media for 24 hours? And for youth in particular, 54% saying that not using a cell phone would be really difficult over 24 hours, and then 44% saying it would be difficult not to use any social media for 24 hours. I think for a lot of those younger Americans, it's going to be really difficult for them to restrict themselves as much as is necessary.
Because it's not just a personal choice at this point. They're part of a social network. They're part of a society that as a whole they want to be a part of that's already there. And unless we see a systematic shift from everyone or the majority of people, we're not going to see a shift in the individual maybe.
This is a very interesting thing too about the concept of digital obesity. You know, normal obesity, physical obesity, you can see, it's visible. The challenge with digital obesity is that there are certainly some indications in this data that it's not great from a mental health perspective, but this obesity is largely invisible to the general population. It's not something that you can easily see and spot, except potentially for a person walking around glued to their phone. So it's one of the more challenging things to kind of tackle as a society. But I think it could be very important, based on some of these indications we're seeing in this data, that this is something that needs to be talked about, that this isn't necessarily a healthy behavior.
And it's normalized. How many times have we been traveling on public transport and someone starts looking at their phone? So you pull out your phone, you start looking at that, and then suddenly 5 other people are looking at their phone. Traveling in elevators, just at lunchtime.
Well, you remember, 10 years ago, there was that analogy that was thrown out that cell phones are the new cigarettes. And it was sort of a joke that it was much healthier. Well, is it? Is it actually healthier?
Yeah, not really. And there's an idea that I've been playing with since I've seen these results, is that why don't these platforms and the app companies actually build functionality in to their devices and to the platforms to help moderate the amount of usage that they have, really drive it down. We've already seen companies like Apple giving you their weekly reports. Fairly ineffectual, right? It's like, oh, yeah, okay, maybe I was worse than last week. I don't really have an idea. But why aren't we having these apps saying that, okay, you've had your 10 minutes, go and do something else? And I think that that's a huge opportunity for these platforms to have responsibility. But at the same time, it fundamentally undermines their business model, which is about capturing attention and really harvesting as many minutes as possible in this new economy. So that's the future of life in America. So where can we find more information?
If people are interested in looking at the data or some of these findings in more detail, they can go to intentions.co.
And do come across to nikolasbadminton.com, where I talk about this and many other things about how life is changing as a whole.